playing against Shedeur Sanders?
Yeah. I didn't throw him a pick, thankfully. I followed Shedeur's career. I mean, any football fan that watched him go from Jackson to Boulder, and that being kind of a former Pac-12 school, obviously was pulling for him. And, there's a tough draft slide, obviously much longer wait than mine was. But it seems like he's, been patient and worked on his craft, and he's been playing pretty good the last few weeks.
Pittsburgh's still the quarterback, Aaron Rodgers.
Do you remember playing against Shedeur Sanders?
Yeah. I didn't throw him a pick, thankfully. I followed Shedeur's career. I mean, any football fan that watched him go from Jackson to Boulder, and that being kind of a former Pac-12 school, obviously was pulling for him. And, there's a tough draft slide, obviously much longer wait than mine was. But it seems like he's, been patient and worked on his craft, and he's been playing pretty good the last few weeks.
That's the Pittsburgh.
Yo, let me paint you a picture. Aaron Rodgers, 4-time MVP, Super Bowl champion, one of the most analytically minded quarterbacks to ever play the position, a man who meditates in darkness and reads ancient philosophy and genuinely believes his football intellect operates on a frequency most people cannot access, sat down, collected his thoughts, opened his mouth, and mocked Shedeur Sanders' take on live camera, calmly, deliberately, with that specific Aaron Rodgers energy that communicates not just disagreement, but a kind of philosophical disappointment that you would even suggest otherwise. He didn't yell like Rex Ryan. He didn't laugh carelessly like Brady. He did something almost worse. He dismissed Shedeur with the quiet confidence of someone who considers the matter already settled by superior intelligence. And then, Shedeur Sanders signed a $300 million deal that broke the entire internet, and every single person who watched Aaron Rodgers deliver that dismissive take with his eyes half closed and his voice at philosophical lecture volume watched the same clip again immediately after the deal numbers dropped. And the contrast was so devastating, so complete, so permanently documented that Aaron Rodgers is now doing something he has spent his entire career engineering his public persona specifically to avoid. He is sitting with being visibly, undeniably, expensively wrong, and the internet is not letting him forget a single second of it. Let's get into every layer of this right now.
Right. Remember, Shedeur takes too many sacks, holds the ball too long, X, Y, Z. King Gatsu says they say they hate people that support Shedeur, but all we do is bring the facts to the table and challenge the narrative. Here comes the holds the ball too long statement. So if you see, it's kind of hard to kind of see what's going on here. So this is EPA, right? So expected points per play, right? For each situation. So these are sacks avoided, right? So this is the amount of sacks that have been avoided.
All right, let's get the full context locked in, because the details here are what make this story go from interesting to absolutely legendary in terms of sports media accountability moments. Aaron Rodgers has a specific media persona that he has constructed and refined over decades. It is not the persona of a man who makes hot takes. Hot takes are for reactive people. Aaron Rodgers is not reactive. Aaron Rodgers is thoughtful, measured, intellectually rigorous in a way that he makes very sure everyone around him understands and acknowledges. When Aaron Rodgers offers an opinion on something, it comes with the implied weight of someone who has considered the matter from multiple angles, processed it through a framework of considerable personal experience and wisdom, and arrived at a conclusion that is more reliable than what you would get from someone who simply reacted emotionally to the surface level of a situation. That persona is what made his take about Shedeur Sanders so dangerous and ultimately so catastrophically wrong in such a specific and publicly documented way. The take came during a media appearance that was ostensibly about the changing landscape of NFL quarterback culture. Rodgers, who has opinions about quarterback culture that he has been developing and refining for approximately as long as Shedeur Sanders has been alive, was asked about young quarterbacks building commercial empires and whether the business side of the modern quarterback profile changed how the position should be evaluated and valued. And when Shedeur's name came up in that context, and specifically when Shedeur's developing deal discussions became part of the conversation, Rodgers did the Aaron Rodgers thing. He took a breath, he looked slightly past the camera in the way that communicates deep consideration, and he delivered a take about Shedeur Sanders that was wrapped in so many layers of measured intellectual framing that it took people a few seconds of processing before they fully understood that what they had just heard was dismissive, condescending, and built on a fundamental misreading of exactly what Shedeur Sanders represented commercially and athletically in 2026.
Thankfully, I've followed Shedeur's career. I mean, any football fan that watched him go from Jackson to Boulder, and that being kind of a former Pac-12 school, obviously was pulling for him. And there's a tough draft slide, obviously much longer wait than mine was, but it seems like he's been patient and worked on his craft, and he's been playing pretty good the last few weeks.
That's the Pittsburgh Steelers starting quarterback Aaron Rodgers talking about Shedeur Sanders and the Clippers.
He talked about the difference between attention and value. He talked about how the market for young quarterback brands often inflates beyond what sustained performance can support. He mentioned something about the history of players who were celebrated commercially before they had established the kind of professional foundation that makes commercial celebration meaningful. He did not say Shedeur's name in the most cutting parts. He didn't need to. The context was unmistakable. And the most damaging part, the specific element of Rodgers' take that the internet immediately identified as the thing that was going to age the worst, was his specific commentary about the deal discussions that were circulating around Shedeur at the time. Rodgers suggested that the numbers being attached to Shedeur in those discussions were aspirational rather than reflective of current verified market reality, that they represented what people wanted the story to be rather than what commercial due diligence would actually support, that anyone structuring a deal at the numbers being discussed was betting on potential rather than investing in established value. $300 million later, Rodgers' philosophical certainty is looking significantly less philosophical and significantly more like a very expensive guess delivered in a very calming voice. Let's talk about the $300 million deal itself, because the scale of it is what makes Rodgers' take not just wrong, but wrong in a way that reveals the specific limitation in his analytical framework that led him there in the first place. $300 million, the confirmed total value of the comprehensive deal package that Shedeur Sanders secured in 2026, a number that includes his football contract components, his commercial partnership arrangements, his equity stakes and venture structures connected to the deal, and the long-term revenue sharing agreements that make the $300 million figure conservative when projected across the full term of the arrangement. Sports business analysts who cover athlete commercial deals for a living, people who have spent careers tracking exactly this kind of partnership structure, were using words like historic and unprecedented and generational when the full confirmed terms became available.
We're saying this about Shedeur.
He played at Jackson State, but he can't play in big-time college football, right?
Whoa! It's almost like a narrative that was so easy to see that Aaron Rodgers saw in 2023, rhyming accidentally.
510 yards week one. Come on. Yeah. What are we talking about here? And the other kid that plays both ways, he's incredible.
Travis Hunter, yeah, he's a dog.
Yeah.
And here's the specific part that demolished Rodgers' framework most completely. The entities on the other side of this $300 million deal were not aspirational investors betting on potential. They were not people who got caught up in the narrative around Shedeur Sanders and let the story run ahead of the commercial analysis. They were sophisticated institutional investors, the kind whose due diligence processes are so thorough and so analytically rigorous that they make most sports business analysis look casual by comparison, who had spent considerable time and considerable resources evaluating exactly whether the numbers they were committing to were reflective of verified market reality. Their conclusion, evidently, was that they were, by a significant margin, at $300 million. Aaron Rodgers said the numbers being discussed were aspirational rather than reflective of current verified market reality. The people who actually did the market reality verification came back with $300 million as their answer. That's not a small gap between the take and the reality. That's a fundamental misreading of the asset, the market, and the analytical sophistication of the people on the other side of the deal, delivered with maximum philosophical confidence on a public platform. And that's what makes this specific instant regret story different from the standard analyst was wrong about a player narrative. Rodgers didn't make a football prediction that didn't pan out. He made a specific commercial analysis claim, dressed up in intellectual framing about market reality and aspiration versus value. And the people who do commercial analysis for an actual living responded with the most comprehensive possible refutation, a signed, confirmed, publicly announced $300 million deal. Watch this clip. Because what you are watching here is Aaron Rodgers, who has spent literally decades constructing a media persona built on the premise that his analysis is more reliable than other people's analysis because he thinks more carefully before speaking, trying to rebuild that persona in real time around a take that did not survive contact with reality. The pauses are longer than usual, and Aaron Rodgers' pauses are already notably long. The vocabulary around Shedeur is completely reconstructed. Not a single phrase from his original segment appears in this appearance. He is talking about Shedeur's exceptional commercial intelligence and his clear understanding of his own market position, and his ability to identify the right partners for sustainable long-term value creation. Language that is the exact philosophical opposite of aspirational rather than reflective of verified market reality.
Next steps are going to be?
I don't know. That's a tough one. That's a great question. That's a great question because I don't want to give you the typical answer of course, mentally, but I would say I improve experience. I improved being in situations and understanding that failing, and I think those are all building blocks to be able to have success. And I like the route. I like the route that
He hasn't said the words, "I was wrong." Aaron Rodgers does not have those words in his operational vocabulary. But what he is doing, the complete reconstruction of his Shedeur Sanders framing from dismissive to respectful, delivered with the same measured intellectual energy that made the original dismissal so credible, is the Aaron Rodgers version of saying it. And everyone who has watched him long enough to understand how his media persona operates recognizes exactly what they're seeing. Here's what this moment reveals about Aaron Rodgers specifically and about the NFL establishment broadly. Rodgers has built his entire identity, on the field and off, around the idea that he sees things other people miss, that his analytical framework is more sophisticated than conventional wisdom, that he is not reactive, not surface level, not susceptible to the kind of narrative-driven thinking that leads less careful observers to wrong conclusions. And yet, when it came to Shedeur Sanders and the commercial reality that Shedeur was building, the Saudi PIF-level sophistication, the institutional investment interest, the genuinely historic brand value that sophisticated commercial analysts were identifying and quantifying, Rodgers defaulted to exactly the narrative-driven thinking he positions himself as being above. The narrative that young players with famous names and pre-built audiences have inflated value. The narrative that commercial attention precedes rather than reflects genuine commercial substance. The narrative that was convenient and familiar and required no additional research to deploy confidently on camera. $300 million is what happens when you replace the narrative with the actual analysis. Shedeur Sanders didn't need Aaron Rodgers to understand what he was worth. He had people in rooms doing the kind of market reality verification that Rodgers was referencing, and those people came back with $300 million. He didn't post about Rodgers' take, he didn't address it in interviews, he didn't let any version of the dismissiveness affect the preparation and the execution that led to the deal being what it became. He just kept building. And the building spoke loud enough that Aaron Rodgers, four-time MVP, philosophical quarterback, man who considers his analytical framework superior to conventional sports media, is now rebuilding his entire vocabulary around Shedeur Sanders from scratch in front of everyone who watched the original segment. That's not just instant regret. That's the specific, personalized, analytically devastating kind of instant regret that hits hardest when the person experiencing it has built their entire brand on being the one who doesn't get things wrong like this. So here's what I'm leaving in your comments right now, and I want genuine intellectual engagement because this one deserves it. Is Aaron Rodgers' instant regret about Shedeur's $300 million deal more significant than other analyst mistakes because of the specific intellectual authority Rodgers was claiming when he made the original take? Or does the "I'm more analytically rigorous than average" persona actually make being wrong more forgivable because at least it came from a place of genuine attempted analysis rather than lazy hot take energy? Because there's a real philosophical argument on both sides, and given that we're talking about Aaron Rodgers, a philosophical argument feels entirely appropriate. Drop your take and tell me, does Rodgers ever directly acknowledge being wrong about this, or does the vocabulary reconstruction continue indefinitely as the closest thing to accountability his particular self-image can support? Comment right now. I want to see the debate. Aaron Rodgers delivered one of the most intellectually framed, philosophically confident, analytically presented wrong takes in recent sports media history about Shedeur Sanders' commercial value. Shedeur responded the only way he ever responds to being underestimated, by building something so real and so large and so definitively validated by sophisticated institutional money that the take didn't just age badly, it got corrected at $300 million worth of documented, confirmed, publicly announced precision. Four-time MVP, wrong about the right quarterback, and the receipts are permanent, time-stamped, and freely available to anyone who wants to watch both clips back-to-back for as long as the internet exists. If you want every update as Shedeur's $300 million deal continues reshaping the sports commercial landscape, every reaction, every subsequent Rodgers appearance, every new chapter in the story the mainstream media keeps trying to minimize, hit that subscribe button right now. We don't miss, we don't fold, we always ride with the truth. Let's go.